Morning. Yeah, you're right. This is a pleasure behind Exxaro. So I think the subject that I want to share with you, the reason why I'm up at the stage today, it's not because I'm an expert in any of the things that you guys are going to be seeing today. But one thing that brings me up stage, confidently so, it's about the journey that we've walked as Exxaro. And when I was thinking to say, look, it's about digital transformation, what have we achieved, what have we done, but what would be the best way to articulate the journey that we've been? And I thought of this to say, how to make a traditional mining organization feel like a startup. If you recall earlier in the discussion, I think it was Mac that spoke on behalf of Singularity. He made lots of great examples about startups that are changing the world. But that is exactly the point that I'm trying to make, to say, we're excited about technology, we are a traditional mining company, or even if you're not a mining company, you're a traditional company. But the essence of the change lies in the heartbeat and how you work as a startup, because that is essentially what is changing the world. So I hope my experience, together with my colleagues that are here from Exxaro, will help shed a light and we can engage further in this subject. Just to give you a bit of background, I work for Exxaro as a Business Optimization Manager. There's a lot of departments in the team that I work with. I think Des is here, Vickers is here, the whole business improvement team is here, so feel free to engage with them. This is just me consolidating my views based on my experience and what I've been influential to do and achieve with the team that is also here today. So if you look at what's happening, retail industry and agriculture, for the past 20 years, they've been at the forefront of technology, and they've been adopting technology at a greater speed than any of the other industries. So what has been happening at the same time is that metals and mining has been declining in terms of productivity. But over the past 3-4 years, we've actually seen a pickup in terms of productivity. There were a couple of issues and a couple of contributions to that subject as to why we're declining. I mean, when the commodity prices were huge, mining tend to invest a lot of capital into getting resources and also buying large resources to invest and increasing in size. There's a say that I like sharing with people to say, one thing about miners, if you ask them to improve productivity, they won't think of anything. They'll always say, yes, you want me to improve productivity? Buy me a bigger truck. You buy them a big truck, you say, I want you to improve productivity. They say, no, make a bucket bigger. You give them a bigger bucket. They'll say, no, add another truck. But we hardly think of productivity in other ways. What's happening is we've now found ourselves with a huge gap that exists between our industry and other industries. However, the good news, which brings us here today, is the fact that that technology that is disrupting the world in retail and agriculture, it's already been proven. As much as we're lagging behind, mining is actually at a very good position where we can adopt these technologies much faster than any of the other industries, because they had to test those technologies. But fortunately, we don't have to. So the big question is, how long will it take mining to catch up? And what do we need to do to catch up? Let's face it, there's a lot of opportunities. According to research, mining can save about 1,976 lives through technology. Secondly, we can save more than 44,000 injuries through technology. We can save or reduce our CO2 emissions by about 608 million tons through technology. We can also bank, as an industry, about 190 billion through technology. But let's also face the other reality that we have. According to Gartner research, and also other research industries, about 70% of organizations is going to fail to achieve its digital transformation goals. The other research, which is over, says only 8% of executives can confess and prophesy to have achieved value out of digital transformation. Also, Couchbase, they've recorded about 9 out of 10 organizations that will fail in this digital transformation. Lastly, based on Forbes research, 84% of companies fail in digital transformation. So you've seen the opportunities, but the reality is we carry on failing. Why? Personally, based on the experience that I've had with Exxaro, and my colleagues would attest to that, there's mainly 3 big challenges that are facing mining industries or traditional companies. By traditional companies, I refer to companies that have been in existence far much longer than most of the startups that are disrupting us today. The 3 things, or the 3 key questions or challenges that we're facing, is that a lot of companies, more especially the traditional companies, we don't know where to start our digital transformation journey. Secondly, we don't know how to realize that value that is trapped in our assets. Thirdly, we do not have the startup DNA or culture that is running, that allows us to disrupt ourselves. So my talk today is to seek to unpack, based on our experience and my experience, how this could feel like in a real mining company and how we've achieved or done some of these processes or journey or experiences in real terms and real life. Where to start? I think first and foremost, the most important thing is to have a bold strategy. Exxaro, we believe that we can improve our market cap to 70 billion by 2026. And in it, about 40%, we believe there's trapped value in operational excellence and innovation excellence. And we're quite resolute about that. So I urge you to have that bold strategy. Secondly, we've had a journey. It's never been perfect. There's never been a journey that is perfect. But most importantly, we've had a lot of lessons and learnings from this journey. The most important one was having an identity of what you're trying to do. You've had your strategy, you've sold your bold targets. What is the brand that associates to that bold strategy? What is the culture that you want to bring through? What is the framework that you're going to put in place to put those things so that it's much easier and practical for people to follow? What are the resources that you're going to put in place? And what are the other minimum viable products that you continuously need to give and show to people so that they can relate to the journey that you're about to take? And most importantly, I think all the other speakers have spoken about the importance of value. It's about value. The journey has evolved. We've learned, we've failed many times. But important about the journey is about where we are. Where we are today, we're simply embedding 2 critical initiatives. The first being the visualization of the value chain. Secondly, the integrated operations center. That doesn't mean that we're not looking at the following. What we believe will change the game is that all of these things are actually linked to those 2 initiatives. And we need to embed that thinking into that. To simplify and sum it up for you, how do you start? There's actually what I call the 8-step approach that we've developed that has worked well for us. Firstly, get your infrastructure in place. Do an infrastructure gap, understand what infrastructure that you want. Secondly, visualize the value chain. Thirdly, bring out the outbound logistics and marketing system so that you have what we call the market to resource. So why are we doing this? We're doing this to give a product to a client. So therefore, the voice of the customer, which is the market, is very much important. So don't just do a push, what we call a push, where you design and get out code from the ground and push it to the market. Understand what kind of qualities, what the client is looking for, and design a system in such a way that it's dictated by the market or the client or the customer. Fourth, get your supporting services to support the system. So you've got HR. One of the biggest problems, I've got more than 10 years in mining doing all sorts of turnaround interventions. And I can tell you one thing. In fact, even outside mining, the number one thing that eats value, it's about labor. It's about absenteeism. It's about those systems that tell you what's happening with labor. Get those systems to come through to understand what's happening. The other one is really the startup culture, the digital workforce, and also setting what I call the innovation magnet. I always tell my colleagues or my friends when I talk about this to say, people say mining is behind and retail is ahead, and they like using the examples of Uber and Airbnb in all of these innovation talks. And I say to them, for me, the reason why an Uber could come up with such a system is because how many people in the world are using transport? Billions. So therefore, people are experiencing challenges, and the problem is visible within transport to innovate. But how many people have been underground to understand the problems that happen there? A few of us. So therefore, you need an innovation magnet where you can surface all these problems out to the world so that those tech guys, people like you or the whole other startups, can understand what's going on underground to be able to assist us to solve those problems. So moving on to the second biggest challenge, which is the value. Value is actually, not that easy because it lies in some of the traditional things that we've been doing. But one thing that has stood out for me in terms of value is that learn from the industry. These forums like today is an opportunity to learn from one another. One thing that we've picked up or learned is that there's 3 big game changes in terms of the mining industry with regards to technology. Number 1 is the connected worker, the autonomous operations, and the remote operation centers. According to research, these are the 3 top game changers in terms of our mining industry. So you need to be abreast in terms of the technologies and all the activities around these 3 key initiatives. So what we did at Exxaro is that instead of too often looking for things to solve in that area, we tried to understand what our value chain looks like. So this is what we've learned as well, is that whenever we talk technology, people too often still see a digital solution in search of a mining problem. So what we did to avoid this situation is that our solution first starts with understanding what I call the value chain and understanding your constraints. So instead of you having a digital solution searching for a problem, you must first fall in love with the problem. Understand what are the best 3 things that erodes or create value in your business. This is just a typical example of one of our operations and how we understood the problems. And our initiatives first focus on the visualization and also trying to address some of those areas that we picked up to be the problem area. We've also learned from Lean. I think most of you can relate to what Lean is about. So Lean is not a new concept. But when you talk about value and technology, people tend to divorce those concepts, try to look for new concepts. But the way that you approach value and you eliminate waste is still similar to those principles that the Lean has taught us. Firstly, Lean talks about labor efficiency. They call what they call the 16 big losses. And it's made out of 3 areas, which is the labor, equipment, and lastly, the resources. But underneath each one of them, we need to understand what we mean by labor. So imagine this, you do a digital transformation, you're looking for 16 losses in these 3 areas, but what about labor? What are the things that you look for in labor? Look for things like this. How do people spend time managing the operation? What is the best effective way to manage that operation? What are the motions involved with labor that is unnecessary that technology can change? What are the logistics associated with people that technology can change? Lastly, how do people take measurements of the value chain? I bet you now a lot of our organizations are still doing manual quality checks, speed points everywhere. Look at those things, because those are the things that will create value much quicker. In terms of equipment, I think the previous speakers have spoken a lot about the digital twins, the technologies, what to look for. But breakdowns are simple, easy things that we need to be avoiding in terms of technology if we had to get value very quickly. Secondly, it's maintenance, your effectiveness, and the speed of reaction time. Those are things that are there based on the lean principles. It's nothing new. All we have to do with technology is to apply ourselves in our processes and say, how do we pick up this value and minimize the waste? Lastly, it's about the resource. So understand what energy is involved in terms of conversion the core resource that you're looking for. Earlier on, I was talking to some of my colleagues from Lonmin, and we were talking about how sophisticated the plant process is and what we can learn in the coal industry in terms of some of the technologies that they have. But the most important thing that he said was that essentially, think of this. If you're a mining company loading coal with a run of mine, which is basically coal, the black stuff that you pick up from the floor, if you're loading about, say, 100 million per annum, and your yield is 40%, imagine how much waste you're creating. You're loading all that 100 million tons for about 40% of what you've loaded. And imagine the trucks going up and down, empty and unloaded and all of those things. Those are the areas that technology is supposed to extract and get value. Lastly, it's about the contracts. You guys have contracts with your client. We've got contracts with Eskom. But what is it that exactly Eskom is looking for from our product? There's certain qualities, there's certain measurements that are minimum standards. How can we use technology to really achieve those minimum standards that they're looking for and save a lot of cost for our organization? Other ways that you can think of this is maybe a question to you guys is, how many of you have a microwave at home? Guys, I'm seeing only a few hands here. How many of you have got a microwave at home? I think, no, it's not a trick question, eh? So I think most of us have microwaves at home. But in the principles that I've just applied, just to bring it home, how many buttons exist on your microwave? My microwave here has about 28 buttons. So my second question is, how many of those buttons do you really use? This is how waste is generated into the system. And let's take it back. What's happening to the processes that make microwaves? These guys are getting punished for quality around the buttons positioning, the processes that are involved for over-designing the system, and all we're doing is creating waste. So I'm saying technology allows us to understand and study and do those activities to be able to focus on really what the customer is looking for and create technology around what the customer is looking for, instead of bringing the bells and whistles that end up creating the waste, make the microwave cost much faster. That's just a practical way of bringing it home to everyone in terms of how we need to be thinking about waste in our processes. Earlier on, I've spoken about focus. I'm not going to spend much time on this. I think a lot of speakers have touched base on the importance of the value chain visualization. But we started our journey with about 596 initiatives. So where we started out, we said, guys, give us initiatives, what would be good to change and digitalize, and people gave us all sorts of initiatives, about 596 initiatives. But we had to take a pause and a reflect and notice moment last year. And that's when we paused and reflected and said, basically there's two buttons that we need to digitally transform an organization. Number one is a visualization of our value chain. Secondly, it's an integrated operations center. A lot of people struggle with this concept of saying, yes, you bring the visibility into a control room and you're having all that data. What is it really all about? Remember what I said earlier. I said learn from the lean principles. Learn from the theory of constraint principles that we spoke about. Understand your processes. What this simply means is that now that you've got visibility of this value chain right across in real time, you can feed into a life plan which is coming out from your strategy in real time. So what it means is that traditionally we tend to optimize two parts. We call it we're optimizing the review process, which is looking historically, and then also try to put things in place. But what an integrated operations center has allowed us to do is basically to optimize the planning process itself. So to make sure that every time that a plan goes to the operator in real time, that plan is an optimized plan. Because optimization begins with the plan. It shouldn't start later when the plan is executed. Then you're asking yourself, what have I done wrong? Secondly, it's in the execution of work itself. That's when the optimization should take place. Thirdly, as you improve the data analytics and all these other analytics that my colleagues were talking about earlier, is really that's where you get the insights to be able to even disrupt and give a step change into the process. Lastly, your improvement process should be embedded into each and every part or every operator. I spoke to one operator when I visited one of our mines, and he said, I asked him, so what do you want technology to do for you? He said to me, ideally, I want to be in control of my improvement as an operator. What it means is that all these things that belong in the boardroom in terms of improving efficiencies and all of that ultimately belongs to the operator. Because that's the person that's physically touching and influencing our strategy. All of us were just talking. So, in summary, in terms of our value, I believe strongly that progress depends on what we understand to be the desired outcome. Secondly, the sub-steps that are involved in achieving that outcome, understanding the risk associated with it, and most importantly, how to mitigate that. The startup culture, which is the last section that I really wanted to touch base with you. I think some of the other speakers spoke about the importance of culture, and they named their subjects, digital transformation, which is correct. But ultimately, our journey at Exxaro, it's not about digital transformation. Ultimately, it's about management transformation, which is the culture. Without the culture, you'll often find people saying this. Change is good, we like it. I think technology is changing the world. Let's go for it. This is good. But you go first. So culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think a lot of you have heard about that. It's a reality. Unless this element is correct, you're not going to win with your digital transformation. And that's coming straight from our lessons that we've had. The other part that I want to share with you around this is that it is not the strongest species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the most responsive to change. So think about that. There's a book that was written about 10 years back called From Good to Great. It spoke about 10 companies that had applied great technologies or whatever, management systems and whatever processes. And they called themselves Good to Great. When we were in Vegas, I think last November, we had a chat and a review about that book, and only one of those companies still exists today, and that was 10 years ago. You know what happened? They kept doing what they're doing very well, but they forgot one thing, to change. And today, they are no more. The other thing that really stood out for us in terms of our journey was the importance of mindset. So often in large traditional organizations, when you ask them to do anything, they always think of these large, bold, big systems, complicated things. But in a startup, people focus on what the objective is. And instead of creating this large boat that you're talking about, these big things that one day will be perfect, startups think differently about it. They bring a speedboat. Why a speedboat? It's because technology to change culture requires us to test things very quickly and get feedback very quickly to be able to reiterate and what we call pivot to make a change and also understand what will add value. The other interesting thing, and this is not a trick, right? What is the objective of these two things that I'm sharing with you up front here? Take a wild guess. Can anyone scream an answer there? To control traffic. Safe flow. It's safety. I think I like that one more. I think there's no wrong or right answer on this one. Ultimately, if I'm the head of public transport, I want to save the life of people through this system. Am I correct? But then, in these two systems, which one has killed more people than the other? This one. So, which one has been rolled out the most and is being pushed the most? And why? In South Africa, less than 1% of our accidents happen from traffic circles. The other 90-something% happens from traffic lights. And you know what's the major difference? Is that we're taking away the locus of control from people. And we're putting processes, regulations. You will stop. It's amber. Now you can go. But on the other side, there is a system that allows the locus of control to be at play with the person, where ultimately the objective is met. And that is really the mindset that we need to have in our organizations and that we've learned as Exxaro that says that is what innovation is about. Innovation is not about setting the red robot, start, amber, now you can go and whatever, but it's about balancing the processes of innovation together with creating the locus of control to people. The other thing is, as large organizations, we became execution machines. So you're getting paid at being good at what you do. So if you look at strategies and you look at organizations, most especially old existing companies, and you ask them, what is your strategy? They want to become better and better and faster at what they do. There's nothing wrong with it. That's what made them big. But unfortunately, if you look at history in the past 10 years or 5 years, the big companies are all new companies. And what have they learned? And what do they have that large corporates don't have? Is the ability to discover. They discover new business models, discover new ways of doing things by taking the value chain, breaking it down, looking at things that they can do differently within the value chain. So if you go back to those 16 big losses that Lynn has taught us, and you ask yourself, what are the things that I can break down in those things that I can do totally different in my organization? That's what startups do. And that's why large organizations fail to catch up with startups. And that's one thing that as Exxaro, we've learned and embedded into our process. The other thing is collaboration. But I just want to emphasize one thing. Collaboration is not an excuse for lack of individual accountability. And people tend to throw away the buzzwords of collaboration, but without understanding the levels of individual accountability that is associated with that. But most importantly, we had show and tell sessions where we invited all our business units to showcase some of the technology similar to this. But imagine this in one mining company that have got same problems, talking about the same problems, what technologies they've applied, and sharing those ideas. And at the top right-hand corner there, this is our CEO. We had about 300-400 people from all spheres and all business levels in the organization presenting what they're doing to transform their businesses and disrupt it. Just to leave you with something, there's about 5 key strategic questions if you want to check whether the culture is shifting with regards to your digital transformation. Number 1, are the users adopting that technology that you're deploying? If they're not, you're not going to get the value you're looking for. Secondly, are the users engaging in the way or in the right way that you're expecting them to engage? Thirdly, where is the process failing? There's always a glitch in the system where you need to understand where the process is failing. Fourth is how do we improve engagement? There's many ways that I've learned today that you can actually improve. I think, not to mention the name of the company, but there's softwares that literally can study how people use the system and pop up quick 1-minute training sessions on you based on where you're lacking. Those are the things that we should be asking and putting in place to make sure that our adoption rate is 100% and giving us the value that we're looking for from the systems. Lastly, it's about value. Always ask the question, what is the value? And by value, I don't think talk local-wise, but talk about the organization, the bottom line, the EBIT. What is the value? And get your people to think like that. This is the picture that I was telling you about. This, again, our CEO. Right here, this gentleman. You guys are familiar with the book called The Lean Startup. It's one of the greatest authors of revolutionary ways of thinking in technology. What we did to get this transformation correct is we took all our senior leadership to a startup conference where we exposed them to different ways of thinking of technology and different business models so that we can come back and disrupt our own company. Next to him is actually the CEO who was really on the floor engaging in terms of the thinking. So this has helped in terms of putting away all the negative perceptions of how we can do things differently, but brought in a new culture, which I call the startup culture within Exxaro. Finally, in terms of culture, in summary, how to win. Get your people on board. Get the culture right. Your processes, I mean the governance. I mean, a traditional mining company is structured to buy trucks, is structured to buy equipment, is structured to buy mines, but it's not structured to dance with the startup. So the processes that are needed to disrupt yourself in this modern day of digital transformation is totally different to what was needed then for a mining company like Exxaro to be successful. So processes can hold you down. And look at your own organization and say, how have we been structured to execute business compared to now us digitally transforming? How are we positioning ourselves and structuring ourselves to enable that speed of technology to come into the DNA of the organization? Lastly, I've already alluded to this point, it's about accountability. Don't confuse incompetence with these buzzwords of failing fast, scaling up, and whatever, testing. Separate these things. There's accountability and there's collaboration. Collaboration means work with people, but hold yourself accountable to certain deliverables. Technology talks about what we call fail fast to learn fast. But don't confuse that with incompetence. Deal with it, and it requires leadership to have the right levels of accountability in the organization. Just to share with you some of the results, because I think I've shared with you what we've done, what our journey was looking like, but some of the results that we started seeing from some of our operations, and I think there's some of my colleagues, Collier is here, from what we call the minimum viable product. So we did an IOC, an integrated operations center, and we did a minimum viable product, and we put it into test. I think sometimes media with one of our largest operations. And really, it's one of those success points in our lives that we recorded about plus minus 5% improvement within that space. These are real stats taken from that organization. I didn't bring the rest of the other stats that they've showed and told us, but we're talking about, those of you that are into mining, you'll understand that overburden is a critical enabler to your process. And you sometimes have to move a lot of overburden to get to the ore that you're looking for, or the coal that you're looking for. And one of our operations recorded about 30% improvement in terms of that critical step of our value chain. And a lot of other successes that we've recorded. In conclusion, I wish to tell you, or I wish to share with you that make digital transformation pay for itself. A lot of people think they have to spend money for 3 years and then hack a hockey stick. No, that's the wrong way of doing it. If you're addressing the problem that is a pain point to the organization, it should immediately pay for itself when you put it in place. Secondly, focus on organizational transformation, not point solutions. A lot of us have become experts in terms of point solutions, putting a system there, a little something that is, going to improve efficiency of something. But if it's not a constraint of the business and it doesn't translate to really impacting the next process across the value chain, it's not going to give you the benefit that you're looking for. Know where to start. I think I've shared with you the framework in terms of where to start. Embed the startup culture, which is what I believe the large organization need to be able to get this digital transformation embedded in their DNA. And lastly, be obsessed with value. Thank you.